Welcome to this session about immigrants and receiving societies. And we have two speakers. One is Carlos Nunes from the United States, originally from Brazil, and you get to introduce your professional background yourself. And then we have Alka Kumar, who is in Canada, but originally from India, I think. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So that is a really, interesting journey north and south and east and west here. So we have a lot of experience in our tiny Zoom room. So I would like to invite Carlos to do the first presentation, please.
Okay, can everybody see it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here and to share my findings and readings and experiences relating to the immigrants and refugees. And I am currently working as a counselor for the immigration, people who are coming in through Mexico, from Central America and Brazil. But I don't want to take a whole lot of the time introducing myself. I would like myself to go into the presentation so that we have plenty to talk about. But basically, Bildung as a response to the ongoing international refugee crisis, while affirming its benefit to host society as an opportunity to create fruitful interactions. It seems like it's a broad topic. It's a broad pursuit for discussion. But basically, we are going to kind of look into the possibilities. And basically, what we have is, what are the basic needs of refugees? Basically, the United Nations departments and the committees and everybody involved came up with the finding that, first of all, refugees need clean water, sanitation, hygiene, education, access to energy and environmental protection, shelter and infrastructure, health and nutrition. So that is basically the basic needs of refugees. But how can society then, or societies, provide building to refugees? And basically we have a few ideas: by ensuring access to basic needs, by ensuring access to personal growth, Bildung, ensuring that the newcomer has a voice and opportunities. So in the bottom, I put like folk Bildung, fruitful interactions, like folk high schools, and self-authored individuals. Now, the question that we come up with is the next one, which tries to address then, what is in it for me? What are the benefits to host societies? And basically, I got this quote: freedom to believe, to speak, to sing. I wish for all that live in the land. Hvid came up with that quote. And basically, what are the benefits to host societies? The formation of self-authored individuals who position themselves as self-authored local team players. I've heard the expression team player before a lot, so I decided to use that. Self-authored national team players, self-authored continental team players, and self-authored global team players in fruitful interactions of folk building in cooperation for global peace and prosperity. So basically, that is my piece, very short, thought-provoking, about the benefits, what the immigrants need, and the benefits to host societies. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you. I know the answer, but I would like to ask you one thing. Who is Grundwick?
Oh, he's my friend. We went to high school together, actually. Now, he was a Danish theologian who firstly came up with the idea to import the Bildung concept from Germany, or German birthplace, to Denmark. And he was the one who, first of all, thought about the idea of the folk high school, but was actually his other friend, the teacher, Code, who actually came up with a working product.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. So the teacher was Kristen Colt. So wonderful. Thank you, Carlos. I know that that you and Grundwick are now buddies.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Alka, please.
Yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me to this, Lene, and I'm grateful to be able to participate and share some of my thoughts on this. So just to very briefly introduce myself and why the whole idea of Bildung even resonates with me. My own work in the last 10 years has been in the field of migration as a researcher and also as a practitioner. And this work I did my PhD in a peace and conflict studies program. So that's, I think, the whole idea of, some of the strategies to achieve win-win, to achieve transformation, to think about issues from a grassroots peace building perspective. And all of that really resonates with me. In a previous life, as I like to call it, I used to teach literature back at the University of Delhi. So my first experience of, German, so Bildungsroman was something that really was a term I was familiar with from literature, because that was really, a text, a novel that worked in that literary convention, was where the protagonist, the growth and the journey of the protagonist was really the focus of the story. So both stories as well as, narrative and other, more interdisciplinary kind of context really interests me. So I will just situate myself in, before I start. I already kind of introduced myself, but I feel like I am living in between spaces all the time. So in the sense, both in India, where I'm from, and in Canada, where I now live, also in terms of a disciplinary home, as I said, literature, and then interdisciplinary social sciences. And then working in the migration sector in the last 10 years as a researcher and practitioner, I identify as a pracademic. And I've always felt that the two worlds of theory and practice should be able to talk more purposefully with each other, and they are often separate and siloed. For instance, in Canada, there's a huge government-funded settlement, newcomer settlement and integration sector. There's also a lot of migration-focused research happening in academic centers that is connected with policymaking. But I feel there's a lot that can be done to bring these two together. So a lot of research needs to be broken down and made accessible to frontline workers who are actually working to support newcomers. And if only they could benefit from that, it would change things a lot. It would bring about transformation. It would center lived experience. It would learn, we could extrapolate from the experience of millions of people that the research already is there about. But that doesn't unfortunately happen because they are two different worldviews, they're two different worlds. So this is one of my pet peeves. I want to also focus in this little talk on on Canadian multiculturalism. So let me say what multiculturalism looks like in the context of Canada. It's official policy and it is enshrined in the Constitution, and we are into 50 years actually of multiculturalism. So what it does really, it's intentioned to protect the rights and freedoms of ethnic communities, to encourage the preservation of their differences, their heritage, their cultures and religious beliefs and their languages, while celebrating their diversity. And as a pathway to facilitate immigrant integration, Canadian multiculturalism does not follow the melting pot template, but rather a very different one, which is that of the mosaic or the colorful fruit salad, where people, you can it's a differentiated kind of identity model. This is good and bad. I feel it's very contentious, it's contradictory, because on the one hand, it is encouraging ethnic communities to maintain their cultural practices and everything, their identity as who they are. The problem is the problem of the situation, rather, I should say, is that not everybody wants to be sticking out as different. You want to be Canadian, you want to not be from here or from there. It's a very offensive question when somebody asks, where are you from? And then somebody says, oh, I'm from Canada, because that second generation, third generation may have been born and raised there. And then somebody will come up with a follow-up question, no, but where are you really from? So, the fact that you can never belong is part of multiculturalism in some sense. Also the fact that you may always be a newcomer because of the way you dress. And this is particularly problematic in the area in which I particularly work, that's labor market integration for skilled, racialized skilled immigrants, economic immigrants, because it's not like multiculturalism gives them employment equity, potential for employment equity, what was called affirmative action in the US, but still the color of their skin and their accent and their names, they shape their labor market integration journeys. So that is very problematic. I think I'll stop there. Maybe I'm done with my 6 minutes, so we can talk about more when we talk.
I think, thank you very, very much. Vladan has been very active in the chat here. So, and you also marked after Carlos was speaking. So Vladan, do you have any questions or thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, of course. One question I would like to ask actually Carlos, because I'm actually more familiar with the Canadian system. So how to say, now we speak about Canada, we speak about multiculturalism, but United States is more about assimilation, and it's kind of historically more about even about racism and so to speak. So are there any more multicultural ideas now dominating United States, or is it more about you have to become an American first, otherwise, you should never have immigrated to our country, so to say?
Very good question, and thank you for asking that question, because actually I had the chance to live in the southern United States for 35 years, actually in Texas. And mind you, I had the chance to wear my cowboy boots and my cowboy hats, but actually in the Southern culture, I think it's a little bit more difficult for you to really find yourself assimilated or absorbed, let's put it that way, into the culture, in the Southern culture. I think there's a whole lot more of multiculturalism, as we are talking about, like in Canada, in the Northeast, even like, New York and surrounding. But that has been historically so. When we talk about, the African slaves, rushing away from slavery and coming up north. I think that was the beginning of multiculturalism in the northern states. Now I live in Connecticut, which is kind of between Massachusetts and New York, so I can see more of that. But I venture to say that having been in the South and now here in the Northeast, I see the issue of prejudice or issue of isolationism or something like that a little bit differently, but yet still there. Basically, we like to joke that in the South, they have a very friendly language, very a warm speech towards you as a newcomer, and yet non-receptive. Here in the Northeast, we have a very or seemingly acceptable culture, and yet non-absorbing. So there are some cultural nuances to both, and people escape, the perceived racial stigma historically, but then yet you go to a new place where culturalism may be the order of the rule of the day, but you find out that there's the same intrinsic problems camouflaged in a way. I'm not going to take the whole day on that one. Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. Thank you.
So Mette, do you have any questions or comments?
What I do have is kind of reflection about what you have been writing about, Lena. At least you make a distinction in the Big Secret and in the following books, touching down on the topic about the country that your origins from and the nationality of the country, and then you have national chauvinism. That's like a turning point, and I think that has been quite eye-opening for us in Denmark, at least when we talk about or try to talk about how to integrate in a new country. It's not like the US because your situation is completely new or it's another situation, but when we have immigrants and we need to distinguish about like you're like you have a mother tongue, you have a father country, we say in Denmark. And then you have the nation that you are a citizen in. That's something different. So have you thought about that, or?
I imagine that Alka might have this it's very similar view as mine, but since I came into the United States very young, and very shortly thereafter, I came across a concept that most people do not really, are probably not even aware, but I developed something that worked for me, and that is called functional citizenship. Functional citizenship. That meant that when I stepped out of my door, to go to work, at 8 o'clock, and I would be at work until like 5 or 6 o'clock, I would operate totally within the English speaking, the American overall culture, trying to speak general American English as best as possible, trying to understand the nuances of the culture and navigate within those 8 hours of my day. That was called functional citizenship, because when I came back home, then I would be speaking Portuguese. We would be watching TV in Portuguese, talking in Portuguese, eating Brazilian food, and discussing the news of the day in Brazilian Portuguese. So I guess in answering your question, I think in my case, I developed this thing that I called functional citizenship. Trying to mingle, trying to live within the culture, navigating without calling attention to my other persona, without imposing my otherness. And that way, I think I was pretty successful. And I think I am still very successful to this day, thanks to this thing that I developed early in my living in the United States.
At what point did that change, or did it ever, from a functional citizenship to actually feeling American?
I am going to tell you a very strange experience for me, because I was mingling with people, because I came in to study theology. And so there were some issues that started happening in the seminary, because until that point, Brazil was a mission field. And then all of a sudden, Brazilians are coming into the United States, not only to study theology, but also to do mission work. And then we began to see, the different approaches as well. People did not have a clue on how to relate to us as newcomers from a mission field to do mission in Brazilian, in the United States context. But actually, what kind of created that impact on me was when I was talking to a friend of mine, one of the guys who brought me to the United States, and he had 2 beautiful, beautiful daughters. And then one day we were talking about, I say, what about your daughters? They're very beautiful and single. and what if a colored guy, and they fell in love with a colored guy, and then they decide to marry this colored guy. And then he said, well, they would have to understand that it's not, approved. It's not an acceptable practice. And then I told him, I asked him, I said, well, what about if this colored guy was me, your good friend? And then he paused, he looked at me and said, I don't see you as a colored guy. I said, but I am a colored guy, and you have pretty daughters. So what would you do to me? What would you do to us? Well, I would have to let you guys know that it's not acceptable. From that point on, I felt like that friendship that we had was not really pure on a human level, that I was not totally accepted at the same level of brotherhood, let's put it that way. And from that point on, I began to start reading in between the lines and assume a position within the American society. That people might say whatever they want to say at the surface level to make you even feel included. And yet, within the hearts of hearts, they may be as prejudiced as the next guy. And from that point on, I developed this concept of navigating through a culture, even though you're not totally belonging to it. Functional citizenship, functional culture. And I lost my friend, I'm sad to say.
I would imagine why would you want a friend like that?
Well, he would have been a great father-in-law, but we won't go. We won't go there. Anyway, but thank you for the question.
I just want to comment with you, Ladan, and I will not. I don't. My comment was not really pointing at any political discussion in Denmark. It was more a discussion between me and Lena and the community, talking about Bildung, and trying to distinguish between different kind of approaches to the concept of a nation and being a citizen in a nation.
Yeah. Okay. So I will just say what it is that I wrote there. It's that, I distinguish between nationalism, patriotism, and national chauvinism. And I kind of switched the meanings of nationalism and patriotism around the way that they're usually used, where nationalism is the bad thing, and then patriotism is the okay way of feeling, love for your country. But really, the word patriotism comes from the Latin word pater, so your father. It's really your roots down into the family line. And you cannot change that. Wherever you go and whoever you are, you will always carry that family line inside you somehow. Particularly if you grew up with a strong, sense of culture and family and place as a child. And then you migrate, and then you enter a different culture, and you may even, love it, be love at first sight, and you adapt to everything, and you change your language, and you change your ways, and you eat other kinds of food, but you will still have that childhood sort of lurking in the back of your mind and perhaps even your heart. So patriotism, I would really connect to that sense of this comes from the family line and I cannot change it. But nationalism then has to do with the place that I'm in, the nation. It's a country, it's a land mass, it's legislation, it's borders, it's language, is all the sort of the symbolic world that we share in a country, and that allows us to, communicate with one another and have democratic elections and, conversations in the public sphere. And so in that nation, I can become and that's how I would really like to redefine the word nationalist. I can love that culture and that country without being a chauvinist, which would then be the bad version of nationalism, because any kind of chauvinism is bad. So if I were a national chauvinist, I would use my national cultural heritage, perhaps even my patriotic heritage, to look down upon other people, to try to keep them out of my social circles, to be, have this racist inclination, whatever. But I would use the chauvinism to sort of dismiss other people because, I mean, they're different. And so the conversation, to me, if I use the word nationalism in that respect, it would be an open way of inviting people who are newcomers to the country to say, hey, we have, this kind of music, we have this kind of food, we have these traditions, you should come try some of it. And I could share their, cultural heritage without it affecting my patriotism, so to speak, my family roots and the history that I carry. And I think we definitely need all three terms and concepts. And I think that as individuals and families and local communities, we definitely need both the patriotism and the nationalism in the sense, because the nation is where, that's where we enjoy rule of law, it's where we're citizens, and it's what we experience outside of the family, where we meet other people. So that was like a long explanation. I will shut my speaking cake hole. Both Alka and Carlos, you have, migrated from, at least, in some respect, very different cultures to another, and definitely different languages.
Yeah, this has been a really fascinating conversation, because I think it has surfaced the range already of the different ways in which people process their place in the world, their identity, their the process of, if I can call it, integration. And to my understanding, it is shaped, all these the ways in which we have kind of articulated it is shaped by so many different factors. When you move, at what age you're moving from one country to another, what were your circumstances pre-migration and post-migration, how happy have you been in your settlement and integration experience, what kind of experiences have you had with racism and discrimination, oppression of what kind. So it's and then who you are, like, the personality, the person, somebody could be a person where, a lot of stuff is water off duck's back. My objective of being here is being met. I'm okay with that. It doesn't matter. And then Carlos, what you mentioned about, I really, it was interesting, the functional citizenship that you talked about. And at one level, when I think of it, I'm kind of seeing a kind of split between who you are at home and what you are needing to be in the outside world, which could be problematic for somebody who sees themselves, or who can only be that one self, right? And so everybody's struggles, everybody's priorities, everybody's experiences are so different. And that's where the interesting part of, storytelling comes from, or even research comes from, because research extrapolates on the basis of all of these experiences, but then people fall through the cracks all the time. Where is research able to get into those nooks and crannies? Not always. And so we try to, and then that's where, as academics, we try to create these binaries, we create these boxes, and then some people don't fit. And then it's like, it becomes about freedom of choice, and it becomes, oh, but you're not speaking to my reality at all. So for me, just to kind of personalize this, I had a full, rich life back in, in terms of experiences and professionally, back in India, where I lived till about 15 years ago, just shy of 15. And so I haven't been in Canada for very long. And I I moved here as part of a family move. I had traveled back and forth on small fellowships and all of that because I was always looking for some opportunities for growth, for learning, for adventure. And so moved here as part of a family move. So it was my husband who had the job because of which we moved. And I held on to my job back at the University of Delhi for long years because I had always been a professional and I didn't know if I could be that professional here. And that's where I think my interest. So I used to teach literature, and I knew migration experiences from a representation and a literary perspective. And then I moved here and had those personal experiences. And so I think I was drawn as a researcher to explore that very area. So my area of research was looking at the labor market experiences of racialized skilled immigrants, because I saw myself as one of them. So my work really comes from a lot of commitment, passion, interest of a extra academic kind is what I'm trying to say. But personally, I must confess, I didn't struggle with too many of personal experiences because I'm a very outgoing person. I make friends wherever I go. And I'm not saying others are not, but I'm just saying sometimes, your personality can also shape your experience. And that doesn't often get into the research. It can get into some psychological based research. But talking, speaking of citizenship, I did not give up my Indian citizenship. And I'm not a Canadian citizen. I'm a permanent resident, although I've been here for more than a decade. So why did I not give that up? I don't know. I feel perfectly comfortable when I'm back in India, and I'm equally comfortable when I'm here. But something in me doesn't let me give up my citizenship, because again, India doesn't allow dual citizenship. If I could keep both, I would give it up in a heartbeat. And I don't like what's going on in India right now. It's too far to the right. That's where the conversation on nationalism is really significant for me, because I think in the name of nationalism, we are becoming fundamentalists. So that's a problem. So I love the India I grew up in, but I don't care for the India that's now. And I wouldn't want to live there because I don't like bigotry, and I don't like, segmentation, and I don't like hierarchies. So where you live needs to resonate with you. So it resonates with me to live here. Though I know that in Canada, there is racism. You bet there's racism. And so there's a lot of dichotomy in Canada. On the one hand, Canada is this very humanitarian, refugee accepting country, pioneer in those, beacon of liberal democracy kind of thing. But then we know our own history with indigenous groups. We know, Islamophobia is very, very kind of there, fertile, doing its thing. So but then when I think like this, I say, but we have to learn to live with contradiction. Life is about contradiction. Yeah.
I wonder if there are any questions, because yes, Vladan, please, or comments. I mean, let's just have a conversation.
So, Madame Kumar, thank you very much for your explanation regarding Canada, including that even in Canada, there are problems with racism despite of all the improvements for the last 40 years. I've been living in India personally. I am having a girlfriend at the moment from India. She's from Pune, like Maharashtra region. And she told me something 3 weeks ago that really kind of stroked me, because she told me that she feels that she's the good immigrant here because she's Indian, while let's say others like Somalis and I don't know, Pakistanis or Arabs are the bad immigrants. And I have like a similar experience, like, okay, you are from Bosnia, you are like a ex-Yugoslav, so you're among the good ones.
And so we should maybe say where you're from or where you are.
So I'm based in Stockholm in Sweden, and I was born in Yugoslavia in Bosnia. I came to Sweden in 2003 as a teenager. It's 14 years. I had one wonderful conversation with you, Lena, regarding my experience with that, partly because my mother used to work as a interpreter after the war with officers from Sweden, Denmark, and from the Nordic countries. And just to go back to the comment and the questions, my question for you, Madame Kumar, is like, do you also have this kind of experience that people in Canada in general think that you are, let's say, good immigrant because you are from India and not, let's say, from some maybe like from the Middle East or some other part of the world that has a, let's say, more negative reputation for different reasons?
Yeah, that's a really important question because it lines up with this whole idea of the desirable immigrant. And so some are and some perceived in terms of perception, which again is problematic. And I don't know if I would be, maybe I would be seen as the good immigrant, but what are the components? I would try to break down the components of a good immigrant. And that again lines up, that kind of speaks to me of immigration policy. Immigration policy now in the last 3 to 4 decades has been, inviting racialized immigrants in Canada. But before that, it was Caucasians only. And even when they opened up because they needed indentured labor. They needed, even now, people are invited through the point system to come to Canada through all the different streams to be able to meet the labor market needs or to meet the needs of population growth. So they are not, so again, the narrative of desirable immigrant is now current, because, and I won't compare with other parts of the world, because Canada has this great reputation of accepting refugees from everywhere. And not that the dominant culture will often say, are we taking in too many refugees? These immigrants, they are stealing our jobs. So it's not like mainstream conversations of this kind do not happen. So I don't know how to respond to your question, because there's a policy piece there's a populist piece there's an individual person piece there. And it's ultimately also becomes about how am I perceived and how much does it bother me? And then if I am perceived by so-and-so in this negative light, but then somebody else in a positive light, I don't know. Ultimately, I think for me, it would matter most if I were not able to self-actualize and meet my own professional and personal aspirations. That would matter a lot more. That would be problematic. But other than that, and there, I don't know. I don't know if I'm sort of responding, if I'm able to say anything that is helpful to as a response, but that's what I was.
No, sure. Thank you very much. I mean, there is that kind of debate. There are such kind of attitudes in Canada as well. So it shows that there are problems, and that you also have like similar experiences, so to say.
And just one more thing, like in the 60s, I know that the South Asians were really not considered desirable immigrants at all. And there were there was this rule that they could only come single to do all the work on the, in the timber in BC and all of that. And then horror stories of the, Kumagata Maru that was stopped, and, people were not allowed to enter. So South Asians have been known to be undesirable immigrants, so they shouldn't come with their families, because then they'll procreate and then they will populate this land. And then of course now South Asians are kind of seen in a sense, coming from, being very much part of the tech world, and so professional, not that, but then the narrative on the other side is people who come from those highly qualified backgrounds, they often don't find their place in the sun here. So, there's research that tells after so many years, you are still making way less than a Canadian-born person. So, yeah, I think Carlos wants to say something.
Yeah, Carlos, please.
I think it's a great observation, and I think one thing that we need to be aware of whenever we talk about the population, the immigrants, and the refugee, and classifying or categorizing people, I think we might venture into an expression of chauvinism in itself. So we need to be very careful because there are differences and there will always be different cultures, languages, mores, and attitudes and everything. But I think that on a more realistic and self-aware attitude is that, yes, they are different. Yes, I have differences with his or her culture, but still I need to be careful so that I don't generalize and position myself in a chauvinistic way by saying this person is a bad immigrant because he belongs to that culture or that other culture. So I need to be very careful about the way I perceive an individual, because some people like look at me today and they they even say, well, I never thought of you as being Brazilian, or I never thought of you as not being from the United States, or where is your Brazilianness kind of thing. I have several ways by which I can take those kind of statements, and sometimes I just choose to just let it go because I don't engage in some of those statements because I want to be seen as functionally accepted by this society, as much as I apply some efforts, to not call attention to what is so distinguishable about me. You see? So basically, I think that we need to be very aware of the fact that we might be hurting not only ourselves, but also my neighbor by putting him or her in the category of not good immigrant. I don't think there is such a thing. I think there is a person out there who is probably dying to know about me and who is dying to know about the general culture, and yet may feel isolated by language, religion, or some other blockage. But still, he would do everything that he could to be considered a good immigrant. Thank you.
Alka, you mentioned literature and the Bildungsroman, and I would like to, draw the conversation back into the sort of Bildung field. Did literature play a role in the way that you have settled in Canada?
Oh, yes. Oh, 100%. I think I am who I am because of being in the humanities all my life. It's about what is formative, what is value driven, and basically coming the nuance again. With literature you are entering into so many multiple worlds, and so you can, I feel it's a great tool. Education, and particularly education in the humanities, is a great tool that can train you to be open and receptive and responsive and to difference. And so some of the problems in the world in terms of othering and what we were talking about, the good immigrant, really seeing somebody who's different from yourself as the other, and the other has to be lower. So it sets up a hierarchical way of thinking. And what I feel always drawn to is, how do we get rid of these inequities? How do we think and come from a mindset where we can be more equal, like level the playing field kind of idea? And so I think when you do that, and again, I struggle with this because while on the one hand, I really believe that everybody is entitled to their points of view, and I will not be muzzled, and I would not muzzle anybody else. But then so agree to disagree. You can't arrive at consensus. And that's fine. But then certain things are non-negotiable. There have to be some moral imperatives where you say, okay, this is criminal. This, I just because you do this or you believe this, that's not on. I'm going to put my foot down somewhere. So I try to. So it's really also about justice, and you can't get peace without justice. The connection between peace and justice, I think, needs to be teased out much more, because that's where transformation lies. If it's patchwork, we can be doing patchwork all the time, band-aid, like, okay, solving this problem, but not really going to the root cause. The root cause often lies in unequal relationships. Till the time the dynamics of relationship building is going to be unequal. And that's the case here with the indigenous populations and the non-indigenous. What does true reconciliation even look like? It has to be action-based. It has to come from an organic, real humanity place. And if you see the other person as the other, then you're never going to get there. How can transformation or social justice in real terms even be achieved?
So do you know any, if we're talking about Bildung as, in the receiving society and for or with or by the migrating people, how can we address this? I mean, what are there like cultural or literary, I really hate the word toolbox, but are there experiences with, actively using culture in this meeting and turning it into Bildung, perhaps going both ways or just going in one direction? And I'm not, when I hear about integration programs or integration projects in Denmark, I don't get the sense that you suddenly take all the, best books from the library with children's literature and start reading the Hans Christian Andersen classics, so that you get a language for understanding the receiving culture, or just for giving these kids, a bigger Danish vocabulary. Immigration projects usually sound like, so we teach people to, cook together, or upgrade their work skills, or participate in like volunteering in community work of different kinds, but actually adding culture to people's lives, where you expand their symbolic world, where you expand the vocabulary, their ability to hear different kinds of music, or expressing themselves in new ways, studying paintings and architecture, the symbolic world. Are there any good examples of that?
So one quick thing, I don't know, I think Carlos maybe wants to say something. He has his hand up from now or before, I don't know. So just one very quick thing I want to say to that is, I feel that there is a lot of strength and value in centering storytelling, in this integration two-way integration kind of work. It's not done enough. It can be optimized, definitely, because that's the one true way to know the other, to truly know the other, to know their story, to see them like a human being. Otherwise, policymakers rely too much on data, I feel. I know data is important, and story not so much from their perspective. But then the way in which story can reach out and make those connections between people, I think we use much more of that. I'm currently leading one project here as part of my research at the university here in Toronto, at Ryerson, it's called the Stories Project, Strangers to Ourselves. And we put out a call for graduate students, both current in Canada, all across Canada, or recent, so they completed their master's or the PhD like no more than 3 years ago. So I have a group of 25 individuals from all across Canada. And what we are trying to do, the goal there is to help them workshop and process their stories. There needn't be stories of migration per se, because many of these these individuals are born and raised in Canada, but there is family history of migration. I mean, who doesn't have family? Who doesn't carry a family history of migration? So basically what we are doing is, through graduate seminars every week, helping them connect with issues. So like, for instance, one session is on race, another multiculturalism, another could be belonging, another is home. So sharing readings and there's so much stuff out there, audio stuff, TED Talks, etc. So it's not a purely academic program, because we're trying to use creative writing as a method, as the methodology pedagogically as well, to help them process their personal story and connect it to the world in which they live, where there are the contentions of multiculturalism or racism or solidarity. So solidarity is such an important concept. It is so problematic that, in fact, that was the topic of our class today. And I remembered, how much gap there is between what I was talking about last night, complaining about Canada, not being, being racist, by et cetera, when I kind of try to poke holes in Canadian multiculturalism. And then there's a TED Talk of this woman who's a seafarer, who was talking about how she's part of the ships, the boats that rescue migrants across the Mediterranean. And so basically how solidarity is criminalized in the context of, stuff that's happening in Europe. So basically we have to, again, context. I was talking about context like last night, how important context is, because diversity, multiculturalism, inclusion, it's all going to look different based on where we are.
Carlos, I mean, I know that you work with psychological health among immigrants. Do you use literature or culture there? I know that there have been programs for like where doctors can prescribe culture in Denmark in order for people to, deal with mental health issues, not because it's, I mean, just dealing with or being exposed to art or literature simply changes the mood and the mind and where people focus, and it brings them, on a different kind of track. Are you working with that in any way?
I'm glad that you asked that, because one of the things that we do upon evaluation is, one of the first questions that we ask is, what is your religion? And then they say, I'm evangelical, Protestant, I'm Catholic, or, and depending on that, one thing, the great majority would be either Catholic or Protestant. And some people call, Protestant or evangelical, it doesn't matter. But the issue is that I draw on their own convictions, like rooted in the Bible, for them to find, to first of all affirm who God is, the creator, who God is, the shepherd, who God is, my refuge. And then that I start by assuring them that they can, in their meditation, we're going to mindfulness, but we use that in the mindfulness to affirm their position in God, that God is not really at that point concerned about the whole world, but you as an immigrant, you're not alone. You see, you are secure. God has a purpose in everything he does. So you are right in the center of his will. And then we go into the second phase where we talk about, and that's a biblical adaptation of, the dialectical. We talk about the past that is gone. It no longer should have the power to destroy or impact your present. We talk about the future as the not yet Therefore, we should not be overly concerned about the not yet. But this is the day that the Lord has made, today. And this is the day that you have the chance to work hard, learn English, talk to your lawyer, prepare your defense, do everything you can to create a brighter, stronger present in view of a brighter and a stronger future, which is still in the not yet, but it depends on how I work hard today. So basically, when I talk to my clients in those terms, I begin to see the change already. See, because now they feel safe because of their own internal belief system. And now they feel like they are given the opportunity to rebuild. I cannot live in function or based on or dependent or victim of my past. I cannot sit idle and wait for the possibility of my future. But this is the day that the Lord has made. So I will rejoice and be glad in it. So I asked them, do you feel safer now where you are? Do you feel happier now where you are in the United States? Oh, for sure. I'll be about dead by now if I were back in my old country. So yeah, so this is the day that the Lord has given you to rebuild yourself, to reinvent yourself, and move on. So yes, thank you very much. I love that you gave me that piece.
I hear you
Yeah.
studied theology.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate it. Thank you.
If I may very quickly add to what Carlos said, I think he's adding this really deep layer of spirituality into what you were talking about, culture and literature and, narrative. And I think that's really important, because what that does is it is tapping into a belief system, which is, so integral to identity for individuals. And also the other thing it's doing, it's meeting people where they're at. Everybody will need different things. So a conversation can get us to a place where say, okay, what will be supportive to this person? So what does capacity building look like? It will look different for different individuals. So it may not work for everyone, what Carlos suggested, but then obviously it's also, then the other piece there is you be respectful, because you're not pushing your views. It's not about what you think. It's about how they can be supported better, and how people can own up to their own journeys and solutions, and because that's what's sustainable. I mean, I don't like anybody telling me what to do, because I think I know best what I need. So if I respect that in myself, and I want that to be respected in myself by other people, why would I not do that for somebody else? So I think there's so many pieces to this that need to be included.
Yes, and I find it very, pointing to what you said, because if my clients begin to point out that, hey, I'm Muslim, I'm a Hindu, I'm Taoist, I would have to do my homework and find out where those assurances and sense of security are in their own literature, in their own religious upbringing, so that I could, do the same kind of work in respect to where they come from. So yeah, I think each culture would have its own sense of security, its own sense of values. Like I said, my clients identify themselves mostly as Catholics and Protestants. So yeah, I have a plate full. But if they were to identify themselves as Muslims or even Orthodox Jewish, I would have to go into their literature, their upbringing, their value systems, and favor, provide them that sense of security. So that's great.
Do you ever meet atheists?
Not really. I not from Central America or even Brazil. It's very, not really. No, never did. What I find is some young people that sometimes, because of their history, they are enamored by this socialism thing. But I find that it's more like a self-discovery journey more than anything. It's not the person yet. It's more a journey. So yeah, but we talk about that when we find it, you know. And they always have a sense like, you know, who was the figure, who was influential in your life? And then he might say, well, my grandmother. And what did she teach you about this? You know, about, you know, being yourself, being safe, secure. You know, how did she interact with her own belief system? And then we will go into that, because people would kind of, you know, delve into themselves and find those values, you know, that would give them a sense of direction in life. And it's not only religion, it could be, like I said, relational, you know, somebody, you know, impacted him or her, you know.
If we're talking about the immigration and the migrants and the receiving society, how do we relate Bildung to this? What does the fruitful meeting between the two look like? From a Bildung perspective.
I understand it very much about being active, discussing about stories, discussing about identity aspects, having constant conversations, you know, using everyday democracy, and also try to understand ourselves as humans. Because as I see Bildung, the whole potential is that, okay, we cannot we cannot change humans in the sense that, for example, as the communists wanted, like, to create the Homo Sovieticus, we cannot really change the human nature. It's going to be tribal and intolerant, unfortunately, but we can become better through socializing, through cooperating, and, you know, have better awareness. And like my vision, like, if Bildung can conquer the world, then we can also reduce racism and social phobias and conflicts between humans. So we can also make migration more easier and interactions and so on. So
I would say that Bildung already has all the components to be a container that can support this kind of exploration through storytelling, through culture, through spirituality, and with a very clear goal that both sides need to be able to build some kind of trusting relationships. You know, for me, the fruitful encounter looks like a mutually responsive, respectful relationships where psychological safety is our goal.
So any concluding remarks before we conclude the session and go to the main session? Cool. And so thank you, Alka, for your contribution, and Carlos for your contribution, your presentations, and Vladan, good to see you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. See you on the other side, so to speak.
Sure.
Let's migrate to the other Zoom room.
Right.
Thank you. See you. Take care. Bye.
Nice to meet you, Carlos. Bye-bye.